it's one. I mean, it's one of several events, but within that era. And if you think about those tests, they're about 50 to 75 questions, if I'm not mistaken. No, no, no. I think I'm doing okay. No, the full test I want to say is the full test may be 100 questions, but the section on history is probably about 25 to 35 questions. And so if you break it up into different eras, if you section it off by eras, you may have 3 or 4 questions from huge significant eras. Yeah, that's kind of how they break it out. Yeah, you may have 3 or 4 questions. And so from my research, I know for sure there is questions from every release test um, that I've studied, went over. There is a question about the civil rights era. I would say it's either 1 to 2 questions, no more than five. Um, I would actually say it's no more than 5 questions about Black history, as a whole, in totality. And so the Brown case may be a question on there, but then again, it may not. There are tests over the years that didn't have no mention of Martin Luther King. And I mean, these are state tests. So, and of course, the state test, that's the test that decides if the kid passes to the next grade or whatever. Our tests don't determine that. Our test only gives them, their letter grades. It's really an assessment for us to know how we should teach them, if we should teach more or less in this area or not, to prepare them for the big test at the end. I mean, that's how it works. The cycle, it goes, it repeats over and over like that. So we mention this stuff to them. We have to know that they digest it, but surface level, what my kids would need to learn is a significant case that was decided by the Supreme Court that changed the education system. That's Brown v. Board of Education. That's them. That's the most that they were on surface, what they would need to know. That's as deep as the question would go about, the education system. That's as deep as it go. And that doesn't go towards the education system. That's really about the civil rights era. So believe me, there is nothing. We are teaching nothing about the education system or the development of the education system in history at all, which I think we should, but no, we don't. So those are just questions directly about the civil rights era. And that's as far as it'll go, as about Brown v. Board of Education. It's I can't say any other way that they would connect it. They would connect it to civil rights movements. They were connected to a series of cases, because they have to know important Supreme Court cases. They'd have to know that. So that's just about it. And so they're not learning about why the cases were brought up. They're not learning about the disparities between the students as far as resources. They're not learning about how the school facilities were different, and none of that. They're not learning about that. They don't have to. I mean, not for, at least as far as the state goes, they don't have to. But also, as far as the test and them passing on to the next grade, which is the most important thing to them and to parents, they don't have to know that. So even as an educator, I learned this as an adult, I knew that the cases weren't just about going to school with white kids, but the details surrounding the cases and the drill down to the money, I didn't learn about that until I was an adult. And so a lot of people that say this and speak about this era as if it was some time that was, you know, a what do you call it? Utopia. No, it wasn't, especially not for us. And this is one of the reasons why they were stealing from us. And the to continue with it, just an overview of it, of the strategy behind the behind that part of the civil rights movement, because there was several moving parts, and this was just one of them. Um, of course, the desegregation emerged as a strategy, as a compromise by state governments under federal court orders, rather than a demand from the black community. Now, this is them compromising. They saying, well, shit, we're not going to give you the $5 or the $4. Well, or the $3. Because remember, it's $5 and we getting back one, but white people getting back four. Now they saying, well, shit, we not giving you the $3. Well, you know what? Why don't you just go over there and share they $4 with them? I mean, that's exactly how it was. It was like, no, we're not gonna give you the money. They were ordered to give the money. The courts ordered to give the money. And instead of them doing so, they said, well, we ain't gotta give you the money. We'll just let you share what they got. And schools was one of, that was just one of the strategies that showed how there was a distinct disparity. That was a way that they could show the numbers, black and white, was in schools. We could do it now. We do it now. You see, with schools, hospitals, parks, playgrounds, museums, different public accommodations. We can point out how, okay, if it's in an area that's predominantly black, this is what the cost is to upkeep the maintenance on it, or the cost to build it over here versus what they're paying or versus what they're spending to get theirs built. We can now directly show the disparities using the strategy that came from, these civil rights cases. And the shift in strategy marked a critical turn in the fight for equality in education. The Brown case consolidated several cases: Briggs versus Elliott, Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County, Gebhardt versus Belton, and Bolin v. Sharp. And that represents a cross-section of America's segregated education system. Each case underscored the profound inequities and became instrumental in the unanimous Supreme Court decision that declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional. And you can read more in depth about that in Margaret Atwood's book, We Face the Dawn. It's a wonderful book. I really, really like it. It points out the different attorneys. She talks about the different attorneys that was a part of it. Talks about Spotswood Robinson and his part on it. A lot of these Howard students or Howard graduates, Howard Law graduates. It's a really, really good book. And just going back what I said before, there was a lot of nuances with the Board of Education case. And of course, a lot of the black people today who wasn't alive during segregation, they all have a problem with desegregation. Oh, we shouldn't have never did this. We shouldn't have never did this. And you hear a lot of them that say that reference Martin Luther King about integrating into a burning house. Now, I think when people use that, they are a little short-sighted, and I think that they are just, for one, it's I think it's like a miscalculation of Martin Luther King and what what he was talking about. It makes to me it makes it look as if Martin Luther King was a complainer, and I know he wasn't that. Um, Most of the time, the people who are using these quotes from him are a bunch of complainers. Martin Luther King wasn't a complainer. He was action oriented. He got in there. He got his hands dirty. Um, and I think it was more of his assessment of the situation, being truthful and straight honest about what was happening. But it didn't mean for people to sit back and just say, "Oh, this is bad. This is horrible. This is horrible." I think it was a a call to action in the sorts. It was saying to us, this is just because we're here, it's not peachy, okay? It still requires work. This is not the end. I think that was him saying this is not the end. Look, we are in a burning house. I think that um his perspective, well, I'm gonna say not his perspective. Well, I'll comment on his perspective, but I think those people who use those quotes, they are they overlook the context and the original intentions of um, Dr. King and the nonviolent movement. Those were legal strategies, and then it was legal strategies and also demonstrations that were aimed at dismantling Jim Crow laws. That and it was aimed at dismantling Jim Crow laws within a system that created the Jim Crow laws. So it's sort of like what I was explained earlier about how um, attorney Fred Gray was in a puzzle, creating a puzzle while trying to beat the puzzle that he was in. And so um, that saying that he told us, he said he integrated us into a burning house, that's just completely overlooking what he originally sought out to do in those protests, in the court cases, everything surrounding those. Um, and he told us, he talked about it in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Their movement approach wasn't just about integration. It was about leveraging the legal system to protect the rights of all citizens, right? Because that's what it says, right? It says all men are created equal. Wow. I give you an unequal portion of, that's the system that they were dealing with. For them to take his comment about a burning house out of context, it's without acknowledging his meaning behind the comment, it's a slight against MLK, if